a weekend of hanging around in Florida then, yeah?
Yeah, that's kind of been his typical weekend, heading back home to his Mar-a-Lago estate on the weekends and playing golf. Although the Florida piece of his vacation or weekend schedule is likely to change in the coming months because it starts getting really hot there. He'll probably swap to Bedminster, New Jersey, where he also has a golf course and a residence. So Florida, New Jersey, whatever.
Not making it up as he goes along, is he?
No, no, he's
On a number
he's
of levels.
he's hanging. Yeah, I know. I heard the background to that question there, James.
I'm James Matthews, and you're listening to day 85 of Trump 100. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Mason, White House correspondent for the Reuters news agency. Some of the best journalists on the planet operate in Washington, D.C., and Jeff is among them. Jeff, White House correspondent today. Where did you start in this game?
You know what? I started as a journalist at Reuters almost 25 years ago. I began as a stock markets reporter and then covered the European Union for a few years in Brussels and then moved to the U.S., back to the U.S. where I'm from in 2008. And I've been covering the White House since the presidency of Barack Obama.
Yeah, you started in the stock market game. I suppose that's useful right now. In fact, I saw you in the Trump cabinet meeting when he was talking about the stock market,
Yeah.
tariffs. Tell me, what was your question?
I asked him for his reaction to stock market drop and also for with the next steps that he expected with China. And his answer to me was that he'd been busy for the last couple hours and
Hmm.
hadn't seen the market. And so I just told him it's down,
And what did
which
he say?
it was. He kind of handed over to Scott Bessent, his Treasury Secretary, who addressed it a little bit.
There was calm inside the room, but outside, of course, the markets were falling. And you had a president telling you that was news to him. What did you make of that?
Well, it's a little hard to believe that he didn't know what the market was doing because this is a president, a leader, a person, a man who follows that kind of thing pretty closely. One thing I will say, though, it's been interesting during Trump's second term compared to his first term that the drops in the market have not been as concerning to him as they have been to investors. So he's definitely over the last few weeks been much more willing to dismiss massive drops in the in equities than I think he probably would have been during his first term. And that's all because of his view that it's the medicine required for the redoing or the upending of the global economy that he is seeking with his tariff plan. But surely, I mean, to your initial question, there's lots of concern in the market, and there's lots of concern around the globe about these tariffs that he has certainly heard. But whether he has, I mean, to the extent that he's listening and then making decisions on that, or else just following his gut. So far, he's primarily following his gut.
That cabinet meeting, Jeff, I think probably says a lot about the Trump presidency. I watched it on TV, and there was something like, was it half an hour? They went round the table, and each individual cabinet secretary essentially praising Donald Trump. And on one view, that was political commitment to the cause and to the president. On another view, it was sycophancy run riot. Have you seen anything like that before?
Couple of things. One, it was more than half an hour, James, because I was standing the whole time.
Right.
I think it ended up being 70 minutes, um, ish. So it was a while. Two, to your question, have I seen anything like it before? The answer is yes. I saw it during the first term. This is standard for President Trump when he holds cabinet meetings. Is a former reality TV host, right? And he likes to have the press in there to watch him do his thing. And he very much likes to hear praise from the people who work for him. And that's what he does. He goes around the table and he gives them a chance to um, give an update. And a vast majority of the time, those updates include some kind of laudatory rhetoric directed at their boss.
We'll come back to Donald Trump, but you've been around for a few years, Jeff. You covered the
A few.
presidencies of, Obama, Biden, and Trump, obviously, first time
I
round.
feel like I kind of grew up or came up as a White House correspondent under Obama because that was my first president that I covered. President Obama was a rock star worldwide, which made him quite interesting to follow. Everywhere he went, there were big crowds. The story that I tell, it's an anecdote about being present for history, which is, one of the privileges of these jobs. Um, I was in the White House his first full day in office,
Mhm.
and there was kind of a late guy in our Reuters team on this particular day, and one of his press aides came down to the press area and told me and three other reporters that Robert Gibbs, who was the press secretary at the time, wanted to see us. So, I grabbed my computer, I grabbed my tape recorder. It was a tape recorder then,
I remember it well.
and I've got all my stuff. And instead of going to Gibbs's office, we walked into the mansion, into the White House building. And at some point, the press secretary just says, "Here, I'll hold that for you." And he grabs my um, recorder and says, "Out of an abundance of caution, the president is going to take the oath of office a second time." And then we walk into what I think was the map room, and there's President Obama, Chief Justice John Roberts, um, and a handful of other aides, um, and no TV cameras the day before. Both he and the Chief Justice had kind of flubbed the oath a little bit, and there was concern that maybe the fact that they had, you know, flubbed a couple words would lead to conspiracy theories or otherwise that he wasn't actually the president of the United States. So it was just this moment that less than, I would guess, less than 15 people in the world got to witness, and I was one of them. And that was fascinating. And then, of course, I reported on it as soon as we got out of there.
And then, of course, the Trump victory in 2016. Big surprise, clearly.
Yeah, and that period for me personally also overlapped with my then presidency of the White House Correspondents Association.
Yeah, the Correspondents Association, Jeff, essentially, it's a body set up to preserve and protect the interests of the media at the White House. Yeah.
Correct. We advocate for access, and we negotiate between the journalists and the White House staff to make sure that everyone's needs are being met. And at the time, of course, President Trump, then as now, was using pretty aggressive rhetoric against the press. And so it was my job to stand up for the press corps and to advocate for the First Amendment rights that are protected by the U.S. Constitution. So that was my intro to Trump and Trump's intro to me. We proceeded to just sort of have ups and downs over the next 3.5 years. There were times when I think I think he does respect my questions, and I think they're appropriately aggressive, but I'm also polite, and I think he likes that. And yet I've also asked him questions that have really, really made him mad.
Give me an example, Jeff.
Well, when the information was breaking about the phone call he had had with President Zelensky, I asked him at a press conference at the White House what he had wanted Zelensky to do in this call when he was pressing Zelensky basically to turn up dirt on his political opponent, Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son. And the president kind of dismissed the question, and I stood my ground and I asked him again, and he said, "No, ask the president of Finland a question." I said, "Well, I will, sir, after you answer mine." And that moment went viral, and it ended up on 60 Minutes, which is a big television program in the United States and elsewhere. And he then cut me off for a couple months. Like he wouldn't engage with me for a couple months after that. And I think the reason it went viral is people were eager to see reporters stand up, I guess, and press for answers. I always make clear and this isn't something that the left in the United States always accepts, but it's true. It's not our job as journalists to be the resistance. We aren't the resistance to him or to a Democratic president. It's our job to report on the news. But that does require pushing for facts, and it does require asking questions that get to the bottom of what's going on. And I think that's very uh, integral to a healthy democracy, and that's what we do.
Let's talk about press freedom, Jeff, because it is a subject very much on the agenda since Donald Trump took power. The Associated Press, they have been excluded to a degree in terms of access to the president and the White House because of this business of calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. They have not done that. It's been through the courts, but symptomatic of Donald Trump's attitude, the administration's attitude to the press and press access. How much of a worry, I wonder, do you think that is right now?
Oh, I think for people who care about freedom, it's a big worry. It's a really big worry, and the AP, as you say, took legal action in it. Um, but they have been excluded, and they're not the only ones who've been excluded. Reuters and Bloomberg used to be in the president's daily press pool every day, and we are now only in every other day. So it's been a real challenge. It's an example of something that he has gone much further on than he did during his first term. There were threats to the pool during the first term. It was something I was very proud of at the time when I was in charge of the Correspondents Association, that we kept the press in the press room and kept the pool on Air Force One. Um, and the fact that he and his administration kicked out AP and have limited access to others, including my news organization, is deeply troubling. And absolutely understand when a new administration comes in that they will have some news organizations that they want to bring in or lift up. I mean, I can remember during President Obama's term that the two hometown papers from Chicago, the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, had seats in the briefing room, and rightly so. Now, the same could be said for some of the more conservative news organizations that are coming to the White House more regularly now to cover President Trump. That's their proverbial hometown guy, and of course, they should have spots in the press room and be brought in for events that President Trump is conducting, and the White House should be able to do all of those things, and is. My argument would just be make that additive instead of subtractive. You can achieve that goal without restricting access for other news organizations.
Yeah. Do you think Donald Trump will go for a third term, Jeff?
Well, he made clear a week or two ago that the discussions about a third term are not a joke, which would suggest that he is thinking about it seriously. But my answer to your question, James, is he can't run for a third term without changing the Constitution. And that's a big lift. That's a big lift. So, stand by if they start making real moves to try to change the Constitution, then I think people would have to take that more seriously. I think if anything we've learned over the last 2+ months, it's to take what the president says seriously, be it on tariffs or retribution against law firms and universities, or in this case, running for a third term.
There is much to look forward to, clearly, throughout Trump 2.0. Numerous strands. I just wonder, what would you pick out as the one story to watch, the one that will keep you and I busiest for the
Oh,
next 3 years and more?
I respect the question, but it's impossible to answer. There are so many strands. There are just so many strands. The big one right now, of course, is tariffs. And I
Hmm.
think the way to maybe make that broader is, I think, President Trump's upending of institutions and of the world order, be it in the economy, which he's doing right now with tariffs, be it on foreign policy in terms of how he's treating allies and foes alike, to broadly what he's trying to do in terms of upending American society with a lot of these executive orders. I would say that's the broad brush story that we will be following for the next 3.5 years.
Jeff, many thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you well for the rest of Trump 2.0, all 3 years of it, and much more. Many thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
That's it for day 85 of Trump 100. If you have any questions for me and the team, we'll answer them at the end of the week. Please do email us here at trump100@sky.uk. Join us again tomorrow for day 86. Bye-bye.